Hello and welcome to this second Wardlaw Workshop. My name's Matt. Every week the museums of the University of St Andrews and the Wardlaw Museum are bringing you projects that you can do at home with a little bit of expert advice from researchers at the University of St Andrews. Last week we built flying machines and did an experiment to see how strong Maltesers or chocolatey bird bones really are by putting a chopping board on top of 4 Maltesers and books on top of that. I know lots of you tried that at home, but I want to give a special shout out to the Warren family who managed 19 books and to Teddy who managed a whopping 20. Well done. I only managed 13, so I think I need some better quality Maltesers, quite frankly. So what are we going to do this week? Let's find out. So today we're going to meet the Inca who lived in and around Peru in South America. So I have my globe here, the UK is here, the United States is over here and Peru is down here. And their empire thrived from the 1400s to the late 1500s, to the time when Mary Queen of Scots was in prison and Elizabeth I was on the throne of England. The Inca spoke Quechua, but they didn't write. So how do we know about them? Firstly, through things that the Spanish have written. So the Spanish conquered the Inca Empire in the 1500s. But can we trust everything they say? Well, would you trust everything a bully said about you? Maybe not, so we have to be a little bit careful about that. But we also know from archaeology. Archaeology is the stuff that we dig up, the stuff that we find, the things that the Inca have left behind, like buildings, like pots that have paintings on that show us aspects of their life. Here we have a tupu, and this is a very standard tupu. Lots of people wore them. They're shawl pins to hold your shawl in place. But look at this one. This is a very special, quite rare tupu, and it's beautiful. Look at that figure. In fact, it's my favourite thing in the Wardlaw Museum. Why does it look like that? People at the University of St Andrews think it might be a way of getting access to gold, to valuable resources. Today we might need one to get access to toilet paper. It's like a badge of authorization. And access to resources like gold was really important in the Inca Empire. And for that reason, they designed things called khipus, ways of recording information like what was being used, what resource was being used. And Manuel Medrano, who is a researcher at the University of St Andrews, is going to tell us a bit more about khipus.
In this week's activity, we're learning about khipus, which were devices used by the Inca Empire in South America for recording both numbers and other types of information from the 1400s to the 1500s AD, before they were conquered by the Spanish. We know that these many types of information were very complex, and they were recorded in knotted strings. Khipus looked almost like a string mop. Imagine one string that's laid out horizontally, and then many other strings hang down from it like icicles. On each one of those hanging strings, there were some number of knots, and we think that in most surviving khipus today in museums all around the world, that those knots meant numbers. Now, the numbers that khipus recorded help us to think about how we learned numbers in school. Try to think back. When you first learned to count, you would take 2 piles of things, maybe marbles or action figures, and you would take one marble and put it in another pile, and that would be 1, and you would go back, and 2, etc. Khipus used a similar method of accounting, because think of, for example, the number 124. It has 1 at the hundreds place, 2 at the tens place, and then 4 at the ones place. Now, in a very real sense, the way that a khipu would record that number on its cord would be, if you were running your hand down the string, you would go down and hit 1 knot in the hundreds place, go down, 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 and then hit 2 more knots in the tens place, and then as my hand goes off the screen here, you would hit 1 big knot at the very bottom of the cord that had 4 twists in it to signal the number 4. And in that way, a khipu, in a very real sense, signaled the number 124. 1 hundreds, 2 tens, 4 ones. Now, how do we study khipus today? There are about 1,000 khipus that are spread all around the world today in different museums and private collections on 3 continents, in North America, in South America, and in Europe. And a lot of the work that the group I'm on, that is still trying to decipher khipus to this day, is traveling all around the world to these museums to document them, to catalog them, to take photos of them, and to record all of their information, their colors and their thicknesses, their lengths, so that we can have this information for the future in a digital format so that anyone around the whole world can access it. And at the same time, there are other researchers, including Sabina Hyland here at the University of St. Andrews, who goes to modern communities today that still use khipus in their own communities and asks them about whether there are any memories about how they used to be used by their ancestors back during the Inca Empire and after the conquest by the Spanish. Through these two strategies, the study of khipus continues to this day. And while the activity this week will have you make khipus in a slightly different way than I just described, still, this introduction to khipus should help get us started in thinking about numbers in a different way than we've thought about them before.
So today we're going to have a go at making our own version of a khipu, and this is something that academics actually do as they try and work out how khipus work and what they say. Jeffrey Splits-Tosa is an associate professor at George Washington University in the United States, and he has made khipus that will be on display at the Wardlaw Museum when it opens, and which you will actually be able to touch. Look at them, they're very, very beautiful, but also very, very complex. Now, the khipus that we're going to make today are not the same as those that Manuel talked about, those recorded numbers. We're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to use a similar approach to record words and secret messages. To create our khipus, we're going to need some paper, some felt tips or crayons of different colours, and some string or wool, ideally, again, of different colours. If you only have one colour of string or wool, don't worry, we can paint it to create some different colours. The first thing we need to do to create our khipu is to come up with a code using different colours of string and numbers of knots. So I've come up with a code here. I've given each letter of the alphabet a different colour and a number of knots. So you can see A is a brown string with no knots. B is a brown string with 1 knot. J is a yellow string with 4 knots, and so on. Now, for my code, I've just used simple colours and knots, but you can make it as complicated as you like. If you want length of string to indicate something, you can do that as well, but remember, it'll get shorter as you tie the knots into it. And if you want to wrap 2 different colours of string around it to make it stripy, you could also do that. There is no issue with making it really complicated. Next, we need to work out the code for the message we're going to write. So my message is going to say Wardlaw Museum. So according to my code, a W is a grey string with 2 knots. So I'll write a grey W there and put 2 circles underneath. An A is a brown string with no knots. I'll draw a brown A with knotting underneath. An R is a green string with 2 knots underneath. So I'll draw a green R with 2 circles underneath, and so on. And so I've got the map or plan I'm going to use for my khipu, telling me the colour of string and the number of knots I need in each one. We can make the top bit that our string is going to hang down from. To do that, you need 5 or 6 pieces of string or wool and tie them together at the top like this. Then we're going to plait these strings together. So in order to do that, you need to group your strings into 2, 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 groups of 2 strings. Take the left one and move it in between the other 2. The right one and move it in between the other 2. The left one and move it in between the other 2. The right one and move it in between the other 2, and keep doing that. And when you've done that, tie a knot in the other end to keep it together. So I've got a knot there, it's all nicely plaited, and a knot at that end there. This is the bit that our other strings are going to hang off. Now, if you've painted your string, you'll need to wait for it to dry. It could take a good few hours. You might want to use a hairdryer to speed it along. When your string is ready, you are ready to start putting your khipu together. So you'll need the plait that we made, you'll need your different colours of string, and you will need your plan. That's going to be very important for helping you know which bits of string you're going to put where. In order to tie your string onto the plait, place it under like that, make a loop, turn it round so you've got a wee loop there, and you're going to put it through that gap there, like that, and pull it tight. Now we need to tie the knots in the strings. So according to my plan, the first string has 2 knots in, so I'm just going to tie 2 knots in there, make a wee loop, push the end through, and we've got a, there it is, we've got a wee knot. Now, it may only be small, but that doesn't matter, because khipus were meant to be felt, so you'll feel the knot, even if you won't necessarily see it. So I'll go and put another knot in there now. There we go. 2 knots on a grey string. That's my W. And there we have it, our very own khipu that says Wardlaw Museum. Why don't you have a go at making a khipu at home? Then you can give someone your code-breaking piece of paper and see if they can work out what it says. And don't forget to send us pictures of your finished khipus. You can either put them in the comments or you can email us on museumlearning@st-andrews.ac.uk. That's museumlearning@st-andrews.ac.uk, and we'll show them next week. See you later.